G'day, welcome to Wouldn't You Know It. I'm Josh, and in this episode, we'll do a short follow-up to the live session I did last week. I'll go through the process for electrolysis, including the solution, the power supply, and everything else I missed in that. Also, personal protective equipment, which I've got on the bench here, and we'll finish off the handsaw. There's only a few steps left. Okay, so here we are. We've got the bucket. We've got it half full of water. Basically, you want it to be able to fill the to a point where the tool is completely immersed. We have a solution of washing soda. This is sodium carbonate. You can use sodium bicarbonate or baking powder. Baking powder has also got an acid in it to neutralize it and make it bubble when you cook. Sodium carbonate is the best solution. If you can't get this and you have to use sodium bicarbonate, by all means, put it in the oven at about 180 degrees for 20 minutes, half an hour. Apparently, I don't understand it, turns it into sodium carbonate. I'm not going to explain why. That's just a tip I read. Don't use salt. Don't use table salt. Table salt's sodium chloride. Now, in the electrolysis process, it creates chlorine gas, and humans don't like that. So, get this stuff. Now, I think I bought this at Bunnings. I think you can get it at Coles, Franklin's, wherever, Woolworths, Safeway, wherever you shop. I'm sure this is fairly straightforward. It's nothing that you can't get at the supermarket. So, half fill the bucket with water. I've got probably, this would be close to 4 or 5 litres. There is actually a mark in here. Okay, so it looks like there's about 6 litres of water. And I put maybe a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons of washing soda in. You don't need much. All you need is an electrolyte in the water so that current can flow from one piece to the other. In this process, you connect the anode to your sacrificial piece. And the reason I say sacrificial is because it eats away. Now I'll get another shot of that close up. So it eats away. You don't want to connect that to your tool, or your tool will disappear and be eaten away. So make sure red or anode goes here, cathode goes onto the tool, whatever you're putting in there to get rid of the rust. Make sure they're as close as you can get them, maybe 5 centimeters minimum. You'll want about 12 to 18 volts of electricity. Now this power supply, this is a 30 volt 10 amp power supply. I bought it from eBay, wasn't expensive. I think this is a WEP brand. Very Chinese. I think there's another one called Yihua or whatever they are. They're all the same thing. They're just a Chinese power supply. It's not a switch mode power supply, but you could quite easily use a battery charger, a car battery, anything. The difference with a car battery is you can't control the current. So if you've got something wrong and the current is too high, you can't control that. So you want about maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 amps. Anything above that, there's something wrong and you need to stop. And in no circumstances use a metal bucket. You need a plastic bucket or something that doesn't conduct. Okay, I think I've covered that off. I'm not going to actually plug it in and run it again. You've seen that in the live video. This just goes into to what you need to do to set it up. So read about electrolysis on the internet, electrolysis, rust removal. That'll go into the chemistry behind it, how it all works. What I do know is that the solution itself has nothing to do with the process other than the current runs through the electrolyte solution. So read about it. It's interesting. I'm not going to go into that here. I just thought I'd show you my setup. Okay, let's move on to personal protective equipment. My good buddy Frank mentioned that personal protective equipment appeared to be optional in the live session, and I agree. That was a good point. It did appear to be optional. I wore these at one point. I'll go into them in a second. But the main things that I missed were hearing protection, earmuffs. I perhaps should have had these when I was using the router table. That's about the only tool in this workshop that's really loud, and when the vacuum was on. So normally when I sand, I do have these. I do wear face protection as well. But these are just bog standard earmuffs. They cover your whole ear. There's not much to them. 100%, I do usually wear these whenever I'm in here doing any machine work. Next is my all-time favourite dust mask. Now this is P2 rated. It's a dust begone. It was invented by a surgeon and works really well. Now, you can use it if you wear glasses, you can use it if you have a beard. It slots on, does up at the back, pinch the nose, and tighten the strap. Now, you can believe me or not, but I always wear this when I'm in here because there's no reason not to. It's unobtrusive, I can breathe, there's no condensation, and it is P2 rated. So for fine dust, it is absolutely fantastic. They're about $60. You can get them from Carol's Woodcraft Supplies. Look that up on the internet. I'll see if I can put the link down below, but let's move on to glasses. Now, these are made by Hitachi. I can't remember where I got them. I think they came with a kit. These are about the only ones that I like. I put them on. I can't tell that I'm wearing them. They're fantastic. They don't take up too much of my view, and they're nice and clear, and they don't distort the image, so they just look like I'm not wearing them. Fantastic. So this is what I wear all the time. Unfortunately, I can't wear this in a live session while I'm talking to you because it's just not practical. I can't hear a thing with these on. So you'll notice in my recorded videos that I do wear this getup. Very stylish, but again, I am a big advocate for safety, personal protective equipment, especially in a workshop. I have 2 young boys, and I instill that in them as well. So thanks, Frank, for pointing that out to me. I just thought I'd address that in this video. Let's move on to the good stuff. We will now finish repairing this saw. Let's take a look.
When I begin this process, I take all the pins out, separate the plate from the handle. Once they're apart, I can move on from there. Once I've secured the handle in the vise, I start sanding with 120 grit sanding pads. These are rubber pads that you can buy from Bunnings. You can see in this shot that I'm using a file to remove any of the bandsaw marks that are left over when I didn't get them during the initial sanding process. Once I'm finished with the file, I hit them again with the sanding pads just to ensure that they're nice and smooth. If needed, I'll use a file to file down any of the rough edges and go over them again as needed with a sanding pad. All this is done at 120 grit. Once the curves and roundovers are sanded to a point that you're happy with, switch to a cork sanding block. I've got one here with a piece of 6mm plywood glued to one side. I then wrap 120 grit sandpaper around that to give it a nice smooth finish. Finish up with a quick overall sanding of 120 grit paper till it's smooth enough and you're happy to move on.
What we're going to move on to now is we've got a nice finished surface. We'll put some stain on it, and then we'll come back tomorrow or later this afternoon, and then we'll put the actual coat of finish on it. But I'll go through staining this now. I'm going to be using Feast Watson brand maple stain. You can get this from Bunnings. It's not expensive. We'll give it a bit of a shake. We'll wipe it on, and then we'll move on to the other finish. Coming close.
I pour a small amount of stain onto an old sock that belonged to one of my kids that I have permission from my wife to use for this purpose. I then wipe a thin coat onto all areas of the saw handle, ensuring even coverage. I simply touch up any spots that I may have missed.
I've let this sit for maybe half an hour or so just to let the stain soak in and dry. The longer the better, doesn't really matter. I think half an hour is okay. We're going to use Watco teak oil. Now, I used to buy this from Masters. I've got no idea where we can buy it from now. there'd be a distributor in Australia somewhere where you could get it from. I don't mind it. It's quite a good oil. Doesn't leave too much of a sheen, and I think it would be perfect for a saw handle. Come in closer and have a look.
I soak a small section of a completely different sock that I also have permission to use with this teak oil finish. I then rub this over the entire surface, ensuring an even coverage and a thin coat. Again, I simply go back over any spots that may have been missed. Don't worry too much about the amount of oil you use because you can go back and wipe off any excess once you're done. Here I'm just using a brass rod to keep my fingers off the finished handle. Once I'm done, I'll clamp the ends of the rod into my vise and leave the finish to dry.
Okay, we'll leave that for an hour or two. Ideally you'd leave it overnight. I'll come back out in an hour so I can film it before we run out of daylight. But essentially that's our first coat. It would take ordinarily quite a few days to dry. I've only put it on very thin though. It's quite a warm, non-humid day, despite the fact that I am sweating quite bad. So yeah, make sure with these rags or socks or anything that you use, open them up. Don't leave them bunched up on your desk. The oil does go warm and create heat internally when it's curing. Now, if you leave that bunched up on your desk, there's a potential fire hazard. They do actually spontaneously combust. Don't take my word for it. Google if you don't believe me. Open these up, drape them over something. Don't leave them bunched up on the desk. That's very important. So we'll come back in an hour or two and see how we went. Okay, so I've left this for about 2 hours. It's not quite dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe it down, and I'll put this back on the saw, on the plate, and then I'll be able to put more coats of oil, probably another 2 or 3 at least, while it's actually on the blade. So let's use a paper towel. Just wipe off the greasy residue.
Reassembling the saw follows the reverse of the disassembly process. Simply slide the saw into the handle and insert the handle pins through the saw plate and ensure they're tight. You can then apply more finish if, like me, you didn't do it before assembly. Now, I didn't show it in this video, but I coated the saw plate with a thin layer of camellia oil once I was finished.
There we are. I've used some steel wool. While I was waiting for the handle to dry, I've polished this down so it's nice and smooth. I've got rid of all the black, so it's more like a proper handsaw now. This handle is all but finished, and you can go and put more oil on it. You can put shellac on it, polyurethane. All I'm going to do is refinish it with a bit more oil. I'll do that with the brass pins in, as well as it attached to the plate. I'm not going to take it off again. All that we're left to do now is to sharpen it. I'm not going to show you guys how to do it because I don't know how to do that yet. Haven't done it. Maybe I'll film it, maybe I won't. We'll see. It's a pretty tedious process. If you really want to know how to sharpen a saw, Paul Sellers. He goes into the geometry, everything you need to know. Paul Sellers has already done. So I would encourage you to check out his show if that's what you're after. So I'm going to consider that done. Thanks for watching this. I'll catch you in the next episode. The next episode will be a 3-legged stool, and that'll be made by Darian and myself. See you then.